The Auburn Express.
You are now listening to the War Report LAUB Town Podcast with your boy Ike Jones.
What's up, War Eagle War Report family? You got Ike Jones. We're back with another LAUB Town today, talking about Auburn versus Mississippi State. Hopefully, everybody is having a good Saturday, and we are ready to watch some Auburn basketball. For those that are unaware, Auburn is taking on Mississippi State at Mississippi State in Starkville today. Auburn currently coming into this game 16-3, Mississippi State 13-6. Auburn 5-1 in conference, of course, taking that loss most recently to Alabama, and Mississippi State 2-4 in conference. When we take a look at the head-to-head matchup between these two teams, this looks like a team that Auburn should beat. Listen, I say this about Alabama, they should have won the game, and they should win this game as well. But we look at the head-to-head versus them. ESPN actually has Mississippi State favored in this game, I think mostly because Auburn has not played well out away from Neville Arena this year. This is going to be a true road test for them against a team that plays well defensively. Mississippi State coming in only scoring 74.7 points per game right now. Not a dynamic scoring team this season. They have not been out there lighting the world on fire. Mississippi State really just isn't known for that in the last couple of years. Chris Jans, the head coach, coming in last season, really helped them to keep the establishment of a defensive identity. They're only giving up 66.4 points per game right now, so they are a dynamic defensive team. When you look at the strengths of this team, it's really going to be their ability to get onto the boards and crash boards, and specifically on the offensive board. They're a good offensive rebounding team, very similar to Texas A&M. I think Texas A&M is a little bit, well, I don't think, statistically, Texas A&M is better offensively. They have more dynamic offensive ability, but should be a good matchup for Auburn, particularly in that I think the teams that Auburn struggles with are ones that defend well and shoot the three well. Particularly those that shoot the three well, but Mississippi State is one of those two, defends well, but they don't shoot the three particularly well. So Auburn should be able to go out here and handle business on the road in this game. When you look at the stat leaders for each of the teams, still Janai Broome out there handling business for Auburn, making things happen in points per game, in rebounds per game, just coming off of a monstrous game versus Alabama. Assists per game, Trey Donaldson still handling business, steals KD Johnson, Janai Broome on blocks. But then for Mississippi State, Tolu Smith is the guy. Early in the season, even when they were playing well, Tolu Smith wasn't there. And he's stepped back in, and he's been the guy for them, points per game, rebounds per game. Now they have a new offensive threat that we'll talk about here in just a minute. But this is a team that really runs through Tolu and his ability to control the paint, both on the offensive glass. He's a really good offensive rebounder, and his ability to pass out of the double teams. So it's going to be interesting to see how Auburn decides to take Tolu Smith out of this game, whether they're going to play a little bit more zone this game because Mississippi State's not a great shooting team. I do expect to see some zone in this one. The last 2 years versus Auburn, Mississippi State's not made a three-pointer. That's not going to happen this year. I think Mississippi State makes at least one, probably more than one this year, because of what we've seen from some of the newcomers on this team. So when you talk about that and the newcomers for Mississippi State, you have to center the conversation around Josh Hubbard. Josh Hubbard, one of the best three-point shooters, freshman scorers. I won't say three-point shooters. One of the best freshman scorers in the conference this season. And there's no doubt that he is going to be a dynamic offensive force for them in this game. He's just a good scorer. I think the matchup that I'm excited to see, because Josh Hubbard comes off of the bench, you typically have Shakir. I think his name is Shakir. Let me make sure it's not Shamir. Shaquille. There you go. Shaquille Moore is their starting point guard. So Shaquille Moore typically is going to be the starter for the team, the more veteran guard. But then coming off of the bench, the freshman Josh Hubbard versus Auburn's Trey Donaldson off of the bench. These last two, this last game versus Alabama, Alabama was able to win the points off of the bench scoring. They were able to get that with some dynamic shooting coming off the bench from a guy who typically starts for them, but coming off of the bench. This time, this is a guy who comes off the bench, instant offense off the bench for Mississippi State. It's going to be interesting to see how Trey Donaldson handles that matchup, and I expect for it to be a situation for Auburn where when he's not in the game, they're going to play more zone. When he comes into the game, they'll play more man to try to force the ball out of his hands and not let him get clean looks at the basket. He's a guy who can score off the bounce. He can catch and shoot. He's a dynamic scorer for this team. Averaging 14.8 points per game, was the leading scorer for this team while Tolu Smith was down. And he has continued to score really well, even in him coming back again. Bench scoring for them going to be crucial for that young man to get going. So I expect Auburn to have a plan to take Tolu out of the game, take Hubbard out of the game, to make other people on that team be effective. Tolu gets his points in very different ways, of course, because he's a post player. He doesn't, come away from the basket and shoot the ball proficiently at any range, really. He's going to be getting all of his stuff down in the paint. And so this is going to be a game where interestingly, I think the matchup between a guy like Dylan Cardwell versus a Tolu Smith is going to be very crucial for Auburn. Cardwell playing good minutes, not fouling, but being able to keep Tolu Smith off of the glass, even though they have some other guys in rebounds that are doing really well for them. Jimmy Bell Jr. is a monster down low on the boards. I mean, this is a good rebounding team as in total. But Jimmy Bell, that's a guy that you're going to have to see Jalen Williams and Chaney Johnson really effectively keep him off of the glass. Auburn second chance points is really where you get into the biggest problem for Auburn versus Alabama. And this is going to be a team, again, similar to the Texas A&M game, where they're not going to shoot a high percentage of it, but they're going to get themselves additional possessions because they're going to crash the boards. And that's kind of part of their offensive strategy, is just get a shot up, and then we're going to crash the boards and try to get a high percentage second, third look. I watched the game between them and Florida, and that was really what kept them in that game, was their ability to play good defense and then rally to the glass to get themselves multiple possessions on a trip. So looking forward to seeing how they do against this team on the glass, specifically the commitment to going in there and playing big boy basketball on the interior. What I do expect from this team offensively in Mississippi State, though, is, again, Hubbard is going to be crucial for them. Tolu Smith on the boards is going to be crucial. If you look at what they've been scoring in points per game, again, below 75 points per game, and that's dropped to below 72, just below 72 points per game in conference. Their field goal percentage, they are sub 60 field goal percentage team, which, that's just decent. They're definitely better from 2 than 3. You hear things, Coach Bruce Pearl say that a lot. So that's why I expect a little bit more zone in this game. The only reason why I don't expect heavy zone is because it's difficult to rebound out of the zone, because your eyes aren't really on a body, you're on a place. So it's hard to turn from a zone and then go find somebody and put a body on them. But I do expect that if Auburn gets up in this game, that they go to a zone look to try to force Mississippi State to take the 3 ball that they're not really adept at taking. But Mississippi State is going to live on the glass if Auburn's in zone too much. So it's just going to have to make a commitment to playing that matchup man that Auburn likes to play, and then putting a body when they get the switches, especially when it's a big on a small on the perimeter. So if you have a guard getting downhill versus a big on a switch, that now the guard is guarding a big on the perimeter, getting a body on that big to make sure that they're not able to crash effectively. It's going to be super important for Auburn in this game. Now, when you flip it over to the other side of the ball for Mississippi State and you talk about their defense, again, this is a very good defensive team. They are one of the better teams as far as what they've allowed this season. In conference play, that's gone up, but this season they're allowing 66 points per game. It's gone up to almost 70, well, a little above 74 points per game in conference play. So teams have been able to score quite a bit on them. But how the teams who have been scoring on them have been doing it is they've shot proficiently from the 3-point line. And so Auburn's going to need to get that 3-point mojo working in this one. But this is a team that forces you to take tough contested shots consistently, and they try to make life miserable on you really in the full court. When I watched the games that they've played this season, they go from this matchup man that they like to play with a lot of drop coverage. So they're going underneath screens pretty frequently to try to make sure that they take away, when you're in your pick and roll action, they take away the roll action from that. But they do a lot of drop coverage. So this is a game where Aiden Holloway needs to be able to, if they're going to go underneath screens on him, he needs to be able to make that 3-point shot that he's going to get as a result of that. Both of the guards, really. Trey Donaldson will probably get that a little bit more than Aiden, because I think, from when you talk about scouting standpoint, they'll probably try not to go underneath on Aiden unless he misses a couple of them. Then they'll try to do that a little bit more on Trey. They'll probably go underneath the ball screen on him, and try to force him to stay out high and make those threes from over the top of a contest from the big. But for me, keys to the game when we talk about what does Auburn need to do to win this basketball game, and I've already talked about it a little bit, it's protect the defensive glass. How well Auburn is able to keep Mississippi State off of the offensive boards is going to be huge in this game, because Mississippi State's going to want to work the clock. They're going to want to drag out the number of possessions that you get. They want to shrink this game and keep Auburn out of the 70s, really. I don't even think Mississippi State wants this game to get into the 70s. They want to win an ugly game in the 60s and the low 70s in this game. If Auburn's able to get into the mid 70s to 80s, I think that they win this game going away. But Mississippi State wants to make this game ugly, and they want to do that by getting multiple possessions for themselves and running a lot of clock. So protect the defensive glass is going to be important. The other portion of this is going to be the opposite of that, which is speed up Mississippi State a little bit and get into some tempo and force turnovers. Mississippi State is the second worst in this conference to only LSU in the number of turnovers that they give up per game. Auburn needs to be opportunistic, get out, get them to turn the ball over, and get running and get points in transition. Mississippi State does a good job in transition with their transition defense, but Auburn needs to really do a good job of getting live ball turnovers and getting out in transition and getting the tempo of this game in a place where they're more comfortable with it. Early offense to Janai Broome and really getting out in transition is going to be key for them. And then the other big thing for Auburn versus Mississippi State, and I've already talked about this, is they need to make 3-point shots. In the conference losses that they've had so far this season, the teams that beat them have each made at least 8 3-pointers in that game. Auburn needs to get to a place where they can make the 3-point shot a little bit more consistently. When you look at the losses that Auburn has had this season, in each of those, not that Auburn has shot the ball particularly well, but they've got to do a good job of shooting the 3 ball in order to really be in these games, right? Like we talk of App State, only 3 3-pointers made in that game. Alabama, they only made 5. Now, the only other loss this season where they made quite a bit was the Baylor game, but then they also gave up just as many threes as they shot. So, but I think that the magic number for Auburn in this game is going to be 7. I think Mississippi State 8 or more, and you definitely get the win. But I think Auburn needs to at least make 7 3-pointers in this game to make this a comfortable one. Overall, I do think that this is likely going to be a close game. Most of the predictive analytics say that this game is going to be within 5 points, as close as 3 points in most of them, actually. And I think I even saw one predictive model on the RPI that said that Auburn wins this game by 1 point. So this is going to be a game that Auburn needs to be able to win a close game on the road. What they haven't done so far this season is a close game away from Neville Arena. Auburn needs to be able to do that. They haven't won any game actually close this season. Any of the closer games, they've lost them. Auburn needs this one, particularly on the road, to prove that they're able to do that. So that's what I got for you guys. I definitely want to hear what you all are talking about. I appreciate you jumping in here with me. We will start things off with Daniel Owen, who says, War Damn Eagle and what's up, War Report fam? It's your boy Dan O here coming with another live edition of a members only live stream. Let's talk about how PETA gonna get called over what we do to them Bulldogs. I like the parody of my intro plus a little levity around the Bulldogs. I appreciate that, Dan. I appreciate that very much. Don Cullen jumps in and says ESPN shows Auburn at 2.5 favorites, 2:30 p.m. on the SEC network. Have they changed this to a 2:30? It is 2:30. I think initially that this game was supposed to be at 3. Okay, so 2:30, but yeah, 2.5 favorite. But Mississippi State, the predictive analytics shows a 65.6% chance that Mississippi State wins this game, which is crazy. The Vegas odds have Auburn winning. ESPN thinks otherwise. And again, in predictive models, I think most of the predictive models say Auburn, except for the ESPN one. So it is what it is. JJ Brand, our guy John Brandon, says we need a double-digit road SEC win. We've already done that versus Vanderbilt and Arkansas. I think we need a close road win in the SEC. John Brandon jumps back in and says, I'd like to see Denver be more aggressive. I think he is a lot better than what we have seen. I don't think Denver's played bad. I think that offensively he has been more passive, but I think that's more so about trying to accept the role as being part of the offense and not just being this, guy who's going to be a high usage guy. You saw early in the second half versus Alabama, he did get more aggressive in wanting to go seek his own shots and did a good job. I mean, he had the first 5 points for Auburn in the half, and I think that he's able to do that in spurts. What I would like to see him do is kind of take advantage of some of the, there's a high ball screen action that Auburn likes to do where he's coming off of a curl dribble. It's kind of a dribble handoff, right? So they want to do this high post big handoff where he comes off of the curl and he has the option to step behind that and shoot. Again, if Mississippi State's going to be playing the drop coverage that they've played, that's going to be a good opportunity for guys like Denver Jones, Trey Donaldson, Aiden to be able to shoot over the top of that. If they can shoot that proficiently, that really, I don't know that Mississippi State has a prayer if Denver Jones, Aiden, Trey are shooting well off of that curl action that they do off of the handoff from the big. But they also have the opportunity, and don't let me forget, Katie Johnson has that same kind of action that they run him off of. They also have the opportunity to get downhill on that. And that's really what I'd like to see guys like Aiden do. Denver does a pretty good job with this. KD's done well against this. I'd like to see Aiden be better at getting that handoff action and getting downhill versus it, and then getting into the mid-range, not necessarily having to dribble all the way down into the paint. I think a couple of times versus Alabama, he got a little too deep without an idea of what he really wanted to do. But really get into that mid-range and be able to get his shot going. I think that'd be a good thing for him. Again, what I do expect for Mississippi State to do is when we get into some of that action is they're going to hedge high with the big on the high side, but then the guard's going to go underneath to be able to hedge and recover. But if you do that, then you definitely need to get downhill versus that big, or you need to pull the big that made the handoff out and then get into a switch action, maybe drop the big down versus that. And see how you can either reverse that or go into your mismatch down low. So it's going to be interesting to see how Auburn has strategically decided to deal with Mississippi State does defensively. I didn't talk about this, but one of the things that you will see from Mississippi State is they'll change up their defenses pretty frequently. And this is something that that Auburn has had some trouble with a couple of times this season with teams that really are like Texas A&M did a really good job of this, is to break up the flow. They switch into a different defensive look for you, and then they'll do that out of different times. So it's like, well, if it's out of a timeout, we'll switch to this defense. Then we were in this, but we're going to come out from the timeout in this other defense, or makes and misses doing different things defensively. They have a pretty effective 1-3-1 like full court press that they do. And they're able to generate turnovers out of that because they take away that middle action that you like to have to break the press. So Auburn needs to be cognizant of that. And then in the kind of a quarter court 2-3 zone that they like to do to pressure the guards out high. That's one of the things that Bama was successful in doing, is really getting out on the guards, and they extend their 2-3 pretty far beyond the 3-point line, so that they're able to pressure you out high and make you have to play or initiate your offense further out than what you typically would want to do against a zone. So look out for those kind of different defensive alignments from Mississippi State that you'll see, particularly when they need to kind of generate some points quickly and they do want to turn you over a little bit more. They'll go to one of those presses or that extended 2-3 zone. So looking forward to seeing how Auburn deals with those zone actions. Don Cullen jumps in and says, we need 3-pointers, Holloway, CBM, and Jay Will to be hot. Jalen Williams is a guy that I think is going to be super important in this game. I just talked about the zone defenses that Mississippi State are going to employ. Him and Chad Baker-Mazara are the zone breakers. They're the zone busters for Auburn. They're the guys that get the ball in the high post and they're able to shoot the mid-range shots. They're able to make the high-low post reads to get the ball either to Janai or Dylan down low. They're going to be the guys that this offense really kind of needs to center around if Mississippi State starts getting into some of that zone action. And it's going to be very crucial for them to be efficient with how they handle that. The Walker Show jumps in and says, I see Auburn sometimes give up good shots trying to make the extra pass and lose sight of the shot clock and have to throw up a shot. It'd be nice if they didn't do that. It absolutely would be nice for them to, figure out, good versus great shots. And sometimes good shots are good enough, especially when the shot clock is winding down. I like the unselfishness that they tend to have as a mindset, but I also want to see certain people be a little bit more aggressive in shot seeking in certain situations, but we shall see. We shall see. David Bush says we need to have a better shot selection. Agree with this. Work the ball to the post consistently, then shoot threes inside out passes where we're squared up and ready to shoot. Aiden and Trey can't get sped up like we did Wednesday. Agreed with everything that you just said. This is something that I talked about in my post game analysis for the Bama game. Is that Janai Broome was dominating that post. And there's no reason why the offense shouldn't have flowed through him in that game and allow him to be a facilitator from the high post or from the low post, whatever. And just what I would have liked to see in that game is them get the ball to him and then start to recognize how Bama wanted to attack with the double teams, because they were going to have to double to be able to be successful against him, and then figure out how they're going to counter that double. I think the same thing is going to happen. They're not going to rely on doubles as much with Tolu Smith because I think that he's really good as a post defender. But Mississippi State is going to collapse the paint. It might not be a true double team, but they're going to move defense in the direction. It's like a gravitational pull in the direction of that post player, particularly Janai or Jay Will. They're going to try to gravitate in that direction and make it difficult for them to see over the top and figure out where the pass is going to be. Auburn needs to be able to, or Janai or whoever that post person is, needs to be able to pass effectively out of that to get Mississippi State moving side to side defensively, because the shots and the opportunities are going to be there. It's just about knocking them down at that point in time. Don jumps back in and says, this is the time where Auburn has to see how much fight they've really got. We've got talent, but do we have enough to fight? I think we do. I agree. Definitely enough to fight. This is where the depth is going to come into place. That's one thing I haven't talked about yet. I did mention a little bit about Mississippi State and their bench scoring, particularly Josh Hubbard. But when you look at their minutes distribution, you see that they are a pretty evenly distributed minutes-wise team, but they have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. Really, that they're essentially a 7-man. Maybe you can put an 8th in there with Sean Jones coming off of the bench, but they're essentially a 7-man rotation. And the biggest thing for that 7-man rotation for me, and this is a point that I did mean to mention, is that if you can get their bigs out of the game or winded or in foul trouble, whatever, Auburn has a distinct advantage there because they're just not deep when you get into like size, right? Now they rebound 1 through 5, even Josh Hubbard, who's like 5'10", rebounds, right? But when you talk about your abilities to defend the paint, when you get beyond, Tolu, Bell Jr., you don't really have a lot of guys that have a lot of height to be able to contend with what Auburn's able to throw at you. So I think it's going to be important for Auburn to figure out how to, number one, themselves defend without fouling, because when you get into foul trouble, it makes it even more difficult to be aggressive as a defensive rebounding team. But if you can get into, a situation where you're getting a Tolu Smith in foul trouble and you can start to assert yourself offensively in the post, it makes the defense that Mississippi State wants to play a lot less effective. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the flow of the game goes in terms of Auburn's ability to get to the free throw line, which they have not done well in the games that they've lost, and stay out of foul trouble, which they have not done, again, well in the games they lost. Actually, they weren't really in foul trouble versus Alabama. I mean, Janai fouled out of that game, but it was very late in the game. But it just seemed like it was very inopportune times that they were getting foul calls. So just got to do a bit better job of defending without fouling in some of those scenarios. Steve Bradley jumps in, says, six more threes for Bama made the difference. Correct. 14-point first half lead by the time lead and 1 by 4 equals 6 shots. Just shows what the difference threes make. As you said, Ike, we need at least 6 or 7 threes. Yeah, I think the magic number for me is 7 here in this game. If Auburn can knock down 7, then you see Auburn. Well, I don't see a scenario where Auburn makes 7 threes in this game and loses. I'll say it that way. I don't see a scenario. That doesn't mean it's impossible. I just think that that's a good number for Auburn to be at from the 3-point standpoint, unless you're shooting like 40 of them. So let me give that caveat. You can't be 7 for 40. But if you're going to take your typical mid-20s amount, you need to at least make 7 of those, in my opinion. Let's see here. Walker Show jumps back in and says no more scoring lags, or at the very least keep the scoring droughts to a minimum. I think this is going to be a frustrating game for Auburn fans to watch from a scoring perspective, because Mississippi State does have teams that just they go through times where Mississippi State's just they lock in defensively and they will put you through some droughts scoring. The key for Auburn is going to really be to not get frustrated with that and start forcing shots. It's continue to take good shots even if you're not making good shots, and protect the basketball. Because what Mississippi State wants to do is force you into bad looks, rebound the ball, slow the tempo down, get into a half court, keep the ball on their side of the court as many times as they possibly can. They want to shrink the game in that way. So Auburn needs to do a good job. Again, transition is going to be so key. Don't let Mississippi State set their defense and entrench themselves. Get out, run, early offense is going to be key. If you can speed the tempo up, if Auburn can get that tempo and the pace going to where they're on a 75-plus point pace, they will be in a much better spot to be able to come down with the victory on this one. Jazzy Joe jumps in and asks the important question, score predictions. I do want to hear what you guys have as a score prediction in this game. Again, I don't have an exact score, but I do think that for Auburn to win this game, it needs to be mid-70s versus low 60s type of game. What I'd like to see in this game, again, from the standpoint of being able to see the type of game that I think Auburn needs to win, is a 72-68 win. Right? Like, I think 72-68 type of game where it's within 5 points, but Auburn still gets the victory is the kind of game I want to see Auburn win, just because I think they need to be able to win that kind of game. Going to be a frustrating game to watch, right? Like, you as a fan, you want to just see blowouts so you don't have to be worried about, in the last 2 minutes of the game, whether or not your team can come down with the victory. But I would like to see Auburn win a close 5-point game in this one, just for their own sake and confidence on the road too, not where your home crowd was behind you and you were getting all this on the road, hostile environment, take care of the basketball, make good decisions down. Knock your free throws down in the crucial moments when they're turning it into a free throw contest, and win a sub 5-point game on the road. That's what I'd love to see Auburn be able to do in this scenario, because I think the team needs to be able to do that to have confidence going into the tournament. You need to get wins like this and make it ugly. So that's what I would love to see. I ain't going to be mad at a blowout, though. Listen, you're not going to hear me in the post game on here, which I do plan to do a post game with you guys, talking about, man, I hate that we blew this team out. Listen, man, if they put 30 on these boys, I'm not going to be mad. But I do want to see Auburn be able to win that type of basketball game, and I think this is the type of environment that will allow them to do that. So we'll see what happens in that regard. All right, that's enough of me talking. I appreciate you guys for jumping in here with me. But before y'all get out of here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the share button, and make sure somebody else can see that. Until the next time, and as always, War Eagle.